Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the WION-VOA co-production. I'm your host, Susan Tehrani, coming to you live from New York City. This week, an important tradition in a non-traditional campaign cycle is kept. The newly elected President-elect Donald Trump met with President Joe Biden at the White House. Donald Trump may not be moving into the White House until January, but he is laying the groundwork and making plans for the domestic policy of the next 4 years. VOA's senior Washington correspondent, Carolyn Presutti, has our story.
Victory Speech Election Night 2024.
We're going to fix everything about our country, and we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that.
President-elect Donald Trump's first priority is to fix immigration.
We're going to have to seal up those borders, and we're going to have to let people come into our country. We want people to come back in, but we have to let them come back in, but they have to come in legally.
Trump won over campaign crowds by vowing mass deportations, targeting millions of undocumented immigrants each year. Experts say this would cost billions of dollars and require massive organization and delegation, none of which has been detailed yet. But Trump's border czar pick, Tom Homan, told 60 Minutes he would focus on workplaces, not neighborhoods. The second priority is to fix inflation.
And after the greatest political comeback in American history, we're going to lead the greatest economic comeback in American history under Donald Trump's leadership.
Trump pledges America First policies with tariffs on foreign goods and no tax on Social Security benefits or tips. The third priority, to fix the government.
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate.
With that mandate, he appointed Tesla and SpaceX owner Elon Musk and former presidential rival Vivek Ramaswamy to head up government efficiency and look at bureaucracy and spending. Having a Republican-controlled Senate and House of Representatives will assure a smooth confirmation for those already tapped for the Secretaries of State, Defense and Homeland Security, Environmental Protection Agency head, United Nations and Israel ambassadors, and more. Just a few of the 4,000 government positions to be filled by Donald Trump.
In less than 70 days, the president-elect takes over, and we will get a better picture of his second administration. But one thing is clear, it will look starkly different than the Biden years. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, West Palm Beach, Florida.
Sitting in the back, I say, get them off this.
We've never had a president who fights more, who fights harder, and loves this
Hello?
country the way that Donald J. Trump does, and that's why.
So each and every day we are
morning.
watching as the incoming administration adds new names to the government team. What are some of the big names added this week for top cabinet positions?
Well, before I get to the answer to that question, I just want to tell you where we are. We are right outside the White House, and this is the inauguration stand that is being put into construction in order to prepare for Inauguration Day, January 20th. So again, we've got the White House here, and right in front, they're building the inauguration stand for the inaugural parade on January 20th when Donald Trump takes office. But as you say, every day we are getting new names that often are shocking the Washington community. Among those, Matt Gaetz, Congressman of Florida, who was nominated to be the Attorney General. Robert Kennedy Jr., who is the nephew of John F. Kennedy, the famous American president. He has now been nominated to lead the Health and Human Services Department. And Tulsi Gabbard, who is a former congresswoman from Hawaii, who is nominated to be the Director of National Intelligence. All of these have one thing in common. They have been loyal to Trump from the beginning. Some of them have campaigned with him, especially Robert F. Kennedy Jr. giving him his endorsement, but they are also highly controversial people. For example, Tulsi Gabbard does not have any experience in intelligence, although she was a decorated military veteran and congresswoman. She also met face-to-face with Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, during that awful civil war in Syria. And for example, RFK Jr. Has been a vaccine skeptic and someone who has some controversial views that are definitely anti-big pharma. So some of these people are really interesting choices. They have definitely created an earthquake here in Washington to see how they will move forward through the nomination process, Susan.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Under the U.S. system, these picks will have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate ultimately. And given some of the controversy that you mentioned, are they all going to be confirmed? How likely is that?
There's certainly a parlor game here in Washington taking bets on that, Susan. But, you know, some of the more controversial picks like Gates and RFK Jr., they may face a stiffer test in the Republican Senate. But remember, they have the majority, and they have the majority by just 2 or 3 seats. So if they can maintain that majority and vote for these nominees, they will get through. And one thing we can tell you is Senator John Thune, who was just elected by his peers as the Senate Majority Leader, he has pledged to Trump that he will work with the Trump administration to unwind, quote, the damage of the Biden agenda. And he has promised.
When you talked, you need to put.
He has promised to process Trump's nominations quickly. Trump also asked the Senate to consider recess appointments, which would essentially mean that the Senate says, hey, we're not coming into recess, and that would allow all of these nominees to go through. That's something that the Clinton administration did, the W. Bush administration did, and the Obama administration did, according to the Congressional Research Service, Susan.
Okay, so beyond promising to return to the America First doctrine, President-elect Donald Trump has not provided details on what U.S. foreign policy will look like under his incoming administration, but his early conversations with leaders following his election victory indicate he aims to fulfill his promises to quickly end the conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara reports.
The war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza and Russia's invasion in Ukraine will be the global backdrop as Donald Trump and his America First foreign policy returns to the White House.
Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again.
Trump's term starts January 20th, but he has already spoken with world leaders, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Moscow denies reports that Trump has also spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump campaigned on ending wars quickly. Analysts say he is eager to deliver.
When it comes to the Middle East, I think in some ways the message will be, hurry up and finish this war. For Ukraine, it's going to be stop.
Trump has never explained how he will make war stop, but often criticizes the billions of dollars of U.S. aid going to Ukraine. A rapid end to the war could mean major concessions by Kyiv, something Zelensky says is not likely to happen.
We want a just end to this war. I am sure that a fast end of war means losses.
With North Korea sending soldiers to help Moscow, the war in Ukraine could have broader geopolitical implications at a time of escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula. Trump must also deal with Israel, which appears focused on maximalist aims rather than a ceasefire, not only with Hamas in Gaza, but also with Hezbollah in Lebanon, the war's second front. Both groups are proxies of Iran.
We see the Iranian threat and all its components and the danger it poses. We also see the great opportunities before Israel in the field of peace and its expansion.
Trump promised to be tough on trade, especially against China. In his congratulatory message to Trump, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for stable, healthy, and sustainable ties.
Xi Jinping pointed out that history has shown that China and the United States benefit from cooperation and suffer from confrontation.
Trump also promised to crack down on immigration, vowing to mass deport undocumented immigrants. On Monday, he moved on that promise, appointing Tom Homan, his former acting U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director, as incoming border czar. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
All right, Jessica Stone is still live with us. Jessica, welcome back. Donald Trump picked Fox News host and veteran Pete Hegseth to lead the Pentagon and Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio to lead the State Department. What do these picks tell us about the direction of U.S. foreign policy under the Trump administration?
Well, I think a couple of things. Hegseth is a Fox News host and a veteran, as you mentioned, but he's also someone who has taken a strong position against some of the hiring practices at the Pentagon, particularly the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion in that process, and has written a book about how some of those ethos have ruined the recruitment process in the military. Of course, that's his perspective, but it's also something that Donald Trump shares with him, and that's why likely he was nominated. This is a secondary Trump priority to ending those wars, is revamping the Pentagon and really changing the nature of the priorities there and helping with recruitment. Critics say that while he served those tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, though, that he has no management experience. I mean, this is an enormous bureaucracy, more than 1 million employees that he's going to have to manage if he's confirmed. So that's Pete Hegseth. Now, you mentioned Senator Marco Rubio to lead state. He is a much more traditional pick. Of course, he has been on all of the foreign policy committees in the Senate. He has taken strong positions on Venezuela and Cuba. He's a Cuban American with a very strong stance against China, anti-communist stance. He is a much more traditional pick, but remember, he also was a Trump critic in 2016 and has evolved since then to become more in line with an isolationist foreign policy, or at least an adversarial foreign policy when it comes to China and Iran, and a staunch supporter of Israel. And he's also, importantly, ambivalent towards continuing congressional support to Ukraine, something that Donald Trump also agrees with. So these are some he's more of a reassuring choice for those on Capitol Hill. But both of these people have to go through. And as I said earlier, Senator John Thune, the new Senate Majority Leader, has promised to get everyone through on behalf of the Trump administration.
Right. And finally, again, I have to ask you, John Thune did make this promise, but some nominations may be harder than others. Do you think that these two individuals will face the same kind of scrutiny as RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, perhaps? The press outlet Roll Call actually tried to ask some senators for their opinions. A lot of journalists were trying to do that on whether or not Hegseth can get through confirmation. And some of them have told Roll Call that they were excited to work with him. Others concerned about his lack of experience that I alluded to earlier. And still others say they just don't actually know the guy. And so that part of the campaign to get him confirmed is going to be to familiarize people with his bona fides for the position. Now, of course, on Rubio, he's a fellow senator. He's much better known to all of these senators. He's popular with Democrats as well. We've heard a number of Democratic operatives and Democratic politicians say, we know where he stands. We feel comfortable with him. And he hasn't always been a strong enough supporter of Trump. So that's actually where his vulnerability lies, is really with the further right part of the Republican Party, those senators who really want him to be even more in line with Trump's thinking in terms of confirming him. Part of the intrigue with Senator Rubio, too, here is that he's going to leave an open position, an open Senate position in the Florida delegation. And there's some speculation that Lara Trump, the president's daughter-in-law, who is the RNC chair, would get appointed to that because the governor of the state, who's a Republican, can appoint to fill the balance of the term anyone he or she would like. Now, he could also appoint himself. This is Ron DeSantis, who, of course, was also an opponent of Trump during the campaign. And so this is lending to the intrigue around Rubio's selection as Secretary of State. All right, great. Jessica, thank you so much for all of those insights and analysis. I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.